Hey y'all, and welcome back to another video of My Creative Life with Kill Sweetie, where we read books and we make art. Today we are talking about a topic that has become a very important one here in the US, and I wanted to use this platform to talk about it in this space that I am taking up and in a way that I felt was useful and informative. Lately, as you've probably noticed, I've been more outspoken in regards to some of my morals. And I say morals because as of late, it seems that we have gotten so caught up in the idea of parties and have completely left behind the conversation of morals. I put out a Target video recently in regards to just simply shopping secondhand and shopping person to person and just being more moral driven with your consumerism if you are Halloween decor hunting instead of having to buy from any store who, in all honesty, in my opinion, had lackluster offerings in the first place, but also had offerings that were completely and utterly able to get from other places anywhere else when they've made their morals known. I say morals known, not what party they align themselves with, not who they decided to work with or whatever the case is, but simply their morals. And I had not that too many folks, and I have to really take the time out to say I am happy that while I've had slow growth here on the channel, as well as even over on my Instagram, I also know that the community that has come around here and the community that I've built and the friends that I've built on here for a majority really understand where my morals lie and understand where my content is. And for that, whenever I do put out a video that's like the one that I'm putting out today or ones that I've put out recently, I get a lot of support. On this channel, every single month, as far as my books are concerned, we focus on diversity. We focus on what heritage is being celebrated that month. And so for that, I think that it shouldn't be a surprise on where my morals may lie in the conversation in regards to immigration currently and what's happening in regards to ICE in the US at this current moment. My partner is the son of immigrants. Majority of my friends are sons and daughters of immigrants. My best friend is the daughter of an immigrant. And the story of all of their parents getting here, while they may be documented now, it is not as easy as going down to the DMV and filling out a form. And I think based off a conversation that I've had with my own family when I first started dating my partner, people think that that's what it is. Oh, I send in some documents and boom, I'm a citizen. In all honesty, in this current juncture, to talk about anybody being legal immigrant when all of us were brought here, anybody who isn't currently being targeted, because that's really what it is. It's not a conversation of legality, but targeting. I think that that conversation is a weird one when, in all honesty, the only people who are indigenous to this land don't even own the land at large, and that's indigenous folks. For the US to have been built on the conversation of a space and a home for immigrants in the first place, to now be sitting where we are right now and to be seeing the dehumanization of folks on that same basis is upsetting, to say the very least. And what I hope that a lot of people are getting when I'm putting out any videos like this, when I'm putting out any comments like this, is that this is a moral conversation. So I didn't want to not say anything because I have this platform for a reason. It's my channel. And this has been bothering me very, very much because it's something that hits very close to home with my chosen family. But also, period, even if it's not something that's hitting you very closely, and I'm speaking more so in regards to a lot of other marginalized folks who have said, not my problem, because there are those out there. I then have to give you the question of when it's your turn and your month to sit there and protest how you've been mistreated, because you have been. Because at this point, I don't understand how anybody at this point could go, there's something within office right now that is not impinging on my rights as a person, period. how can you possibly sit there and want anybody else to care if when it has to do with something else that doesn't have to do with your rights personally, you don't care? I don't understand that. And a big conversation in regards to empathy. And I know that there's conversation in regards to burnout for people who are marginalized and who are constantly fighting for their rights themselves. And unfortunately, we have built and been put into a society where we are constantly needing to fight. But at the same time, that is why people, you should have the possibility and the trust there's going to be somebody else out there fighting for your right while you recharge. You have to have a balance of I'm fighting, I'm fighting, I'm fighting, and then going, now I need time to recharge. Now I need time to celebrate who I am. Now I need, especially because I've heard a lot of that too, right? It's Pride Month. And a lot of us, a lot of queer folks are just like, this is supposed to be a time of celebration. And it's like, yes, it's true. But this also needs to be a time, this is what's happening at this current juncture. And whether it's okay in the morning, you're going to the protest, and later on that night, you're celebrating yourself, or the following day in order for you to rest and recharge. Or again, something else that's been making its rounds is, well, I can't go out there and protest, or I feel uncomfortable, or I don't know how to do this. And it's like, fine. There's so many different ways for you to be a part of this, whether it's what I'm doing right now, and that's simply being taking your platform and using it as a means to share the message, whether it's talking with your family members and standing up for what's right within those family groups, whether it's simply the silent act of donating to help out those who need legal fees in regards to ICE, or need any help in regards to that, whether it's just sharing information, real information on social media so that people are informed that things are going on. There's so many different ways and different roles to being a part of something that is revolutionary. Is not simply just being the one on the front lines. There are people who are made for that. And they do that, and it's fantastic, and it's wonderful, and it's necessary. But it's not the only role. I can't say enough that this is a conversation in regards to human rights. Immigrants are humans. It should be as simple as that. Unfortunately, it's not. As we're sitting here, and as somebody may go, well, this is a book channel. I like to read. Reading isn't political, which that's obviously a lie. Fiction isn't political. That is a lie. I'd like to bring it full circle on this is a book channel. So let me share with y'all some books in regards to immigrants and their stories, and some points that I've seen floating around about immigrants and their stories. First one on the list, Pinata by Leopoldo Gout. Blew me out the water when I first read it. Covers so much. It covers a lot in regards to South America, borders, land, ghost haunting of your ancestors, anger, pure anger that your ancestors may have for how they were treated, and a haunting in regards to indigenous Mexican folks. A mother brings her two children on a excavation like trip with her as she's building this hotel. This hotel is on indigenous land in Mexico. They're treated like outsiders. Of course, their mother has kind of Americanized them just a bit, her two children, because they've never really been to South America much. And she has some internal concerns about that, about how much she's not taught them. And while they're there, the youngest child is met with a indigenous spirit that takes over her body and is out for blood because of what has happened to them in the past by those who took their lands. And I think that what I loved about this book is that it was a very layered conversation in regards to anger on what has been done to ancestors. But what I also loved about this is that there is a lot of scenes in regards to how it is to move from border to border, how it is to cross over illegally or legally versus legally into the US versus Mexico. And also the conversation of even those who are indigenous to both those lands, how their feelings and ancestorship. Because I think a lot of us are like, our ancestors, they were such like, we ask for prayers, we ask for them to watch over us. Some of them are mad. So I think that it was very scary in many different portions and full of horror and haunting, but also history. It talks about things in a way that is very natural. I think one thing that I'm constantly talking about on this channel is about bringing up these concepts and these topics in a way that feel very natural so that you can understand them in a real world concept, not simply, well, here's a scene regarding border crossing, and like we're gonna place it directly into this scene and talk about it and whatever in this very political, stuffy is the word that's coming to mind sense, but in a very, this is part of the story and the flow and this is how it is and we're talking about it and you come to your terms on how that experience was. I appreciate that because we need more situations where people aren't simply reading these things and aren't applying them to real life situations. And this book requires you to look at all of the layers within this. And it brings up a lot of the questions and the issues right now that we're currently experiencing, especially one in regards to ancestorship and land. Next story is one that a lot of y'all may know, and that's Monstrillo by Gerardo Samano Cordova. I think that this is a really great representation in regards to immigration and family dynamics. But as we see lots of folks right now, families getting split up and pulled apart, asking that question and seeing that dynamic and humanizing what immigrant families are as a unit. This takes place on a family that are immigrants, and I think that a lot of people forget that when they're reading this. They're thinking about Monstrillo and his identity and him being a monster and the love that he receives from his family. But I think this all starts them being in South America, living there, and then ending up in New York. And while it may not go directly into the conversation of how they immigrated there, it does talk about that transition and why it happened in the first place, but also completely humanizes the experience and normalizes the experience of being an immigrant and being an immigrant family. And I think that's something that a lot of people are forgetting. I think that a lot of people are simply looking at a label on these families, on these people. And it's at the end of the day, these are humans. These people that you were talking about are humans, and humanizing the relationships, the families that are being built here, normalizing that experience is one that's important. Reservoir Witches. This made me cry many different times. I read this in the context of it being about women and their experiences in South America, in Mexico specifically, and the many different experiences and the life that is full of in this book. Some of it very, very hard. And while it was written in the context of queerness and women as a whole, all women as a whole, I think the thing that I got most out of it was learning more about the experience of being femme, being a woman in Mexico and that experience, and even some of the conversations in here of women who are trying to cross the border in order to have better circumstances and a better life, and what those circumstances are in Mexico for a lot of people, especially in metropolitan areas. I think that this put a lot of perspective on that. Not one necessarily that I was needing in order to change my moral thoughts about those who immigrate here from Mexico, but context just information based, because there are portions in here that are simply breathtaking to ever think that somebody has to deal with on a day-to-day basis and normalize for themselves. Though it is short, it is powerful. So I can't recommend this enough to those who are simply, again, this is all about humanizing these people who are experiencing what's happening right now in the US, experiencing ICE, experiencing the issues of immigration. And this really talks to those specifically who are being targeted. And it's 13 stories. So it's not like it was just like one long story. These were stories that were sometimes 5 pages long and were that impactful. So I can't recommend it enough to you. Last book that I'm recommending may seem a little out of the ordinary for the other ones that I've already recommended because it may not seem direct, and that's This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno. One thing that I've been noticing a lot of is the conversation of those who are Latino and immigrants and their work being equal to their worth in this country. They're hardworking and they cook your food and they pick your plant their produce and they clean, and I've seen that narrative. And while portions of that narrative were originally brought up by the community simply to disprove the stereotype that of criminals or laziness or whatever the case is, this should not be the crux whatsoever. It's become a stereotype all of its own because there are plenty of Latinos and those who are immigrants who don't work those stations at all, who are working plenty of other jobs that are not blue collar, and I think that by creating this crux that is where the worth lies, that is why immigrants need to be in this country. It negates the point of immigration to build a better life for oneself, whatever that may mean. How many people do you know who aren't necessarily immigrants who don't feed into those things, who may be quote unquote lazy or aren't giving their worth to society? Do they need to be kicked out of the country as well? When you switch that double standard, what are you left with? Because it's clearly racism. So the reason why I bring this book up is because our main character, who it comes from an immigrant family and is dating someone, Vera, who has immigrant parents who are Latino. They're in Chicago, and both of them work, white collar jobs. But their parents as well necessarily worked jobs that were different than that as well. And it's more so to go into something that's a little less straightforward, just like how I had with the Monstrilio recommendation, that this is proving a point of normalizing those who are immigrants do not feed a stereotype of what is worthy of immigrant, moral. And I think that this had a very great job, while absolutely heartbreaking in regards to the conversation of grief. It talks a lot about Thiago and his relationship with his late wife's mother. I will say, a little bit of a trigger warning. This is still probably one of the most heartbreaking novels I ever read in regards to grief and depression. So before you go into this book, I do recommend you to just take that note because it is a hard one. The last three books I'm recommending more so in regards to the myth of only Latinos are being targeted right now. And that's not true. As earlier this week, Chinatown was targeted. There, while we are seeing it more so in droves of those who are Latino and from South America, even more so Mexican, this is something that affects all immigrants. You think right now it's not targeting you, but as we have learned from history, once they're done there, they're going to move on to the next community. So I wanted to reference three other books that I absolutely love that have the conversation of being an immigrant, especially being younger, and trying to not necessarily assimilate, but learn how to combine your American upbringing within the states, as some people who are daughters of immigrants. 'Cause all of these are femmes. So Severance by Ling Ma is still super influential. I think about it all the time. But this really talks more so about that hard working that we just talked about, stereotype or ideology of immigration being done right, the hardworking immigrant, and how that's passed down to generations in order to prove one's worth. In certain lights, it's empowering. That conversation is empowering. I want to sit here and I want to work my tail off for my parents who sacrificed everything to come here. That, in one way, is very inspiring. In the other way, it can feed into stereotypes that were created by those who are racist and xenophobic, and that you are only worth coming here because you are hardworking, not simply because it's just land. So, Severance talks a lot about this, but from the point of view of our main character, they are Asian, but I believe in it's Chinese, not Korean. And it was still very moving to hear about that because I think that is something that is passed down to many different people of color, period, but especially within those who are like the kids of immigrants. Another one that was really moving, and I read this recently, was The Eyes Are the Best Part. This has to do in that conversation, but more so in a cultural dynamic. Our main character, Ji Won, has a very difficult time trying to understand the Korean culture that her mother grew up in and immigrated from Korea from, and combining that with her upbringing now in America, especially in regards to exoticism. And Ji-won is experiencing that a ton in here as she is being exoticized by her mother's boyfriend, by a classmate, and trying to move through those feelings and that ultimate rage that's sitting inside of her as she's trying to really try and find a understanding for her mom's upbringing and their culture, by not wanting to lose that culture and that connection to that, but also realizing that she's coming up in something completely different than that and trying to find the connection between the two for her specifically. Another book that kind of deals with some of those same topics was Natural Beauty by Ling Wang. There's not a lot of self-identification or actualization, in my opinion, from the main character because we don't even learn their name. Everything that Ji-won was experiencing in The Eyes of the Best Part, our main character is mainly experiencing here, but from a point of perspective at how do I navigate society when I'm still taking care of my own parents, when I'm queer and I don't know what that looks like, when I don't know who I am outside of what has been presented to me as the successful, the pretty, the fill in the blank on, this positive spin on things and what that basis is for those things, which is European standards, feminine standards that have been set by those who are of a certain kind. Morally, what is good for me? What is success? Is it me being this artist? Is it me working within this? How much is success? What's health? All of these different things that are brought up in here that have to do with these cultural divides and trying to figure them out in a country that has said that you are none of those things just out the gate from being born. I think that this deals with that a lot, and I really, really loved it. So, those are all of the recommendations that I have for today's video. Again, I know that this is a heavy one, but what's going on right now has been heavy, and I've tried to figure out how I can best feel like I'm at least using my platform for something. I love giving y'all book recommendations. I love talking about Halloween and doing creative stuff with y'all, and that will continue and that will happen. But at the same time, I am a person, and if you haven't noticed on this channel, diversity and morals and the conversation of others and their experiences are the main crux of all of the books that I read and what this channel is built on. So if this is any surprise to you, it shouldn't be. But I also hope that having some of these recommendations, they're not simply recommendations just to hit a topic, but recommendations to also prove reading is political. Reading fiction can be political. Reading fiction comes from a place where you can read from a safe distance and learn about others and their communities from others directly from the source. This is a moral conversation. These are human rights conversations. Some of y'all may get that today. Some of y'all may love this video. Some of y'all may not love this video. I don't know. I don't really care. I do know that I needed to sit here in my own way and talk through what's been happening recently, especially living in Los Angeles, especially having the family and the friends and the partners that I have. So, hope that you do enjoy the message. I hope that you do understand the message and that you're out there doing what your part can be. And I do hope to see you in the next video. Thanks a lot. Bye.